So hello and welcome. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is a special episode of The Way to Be. We're looking at a top bar hive here, and there's a problem. They're being robbed. So it's very important this time of year. It is October of 2025. It is warm outside, and once bees find an entrance into a beehive, as they have here, and once they get access to honey or open nectar, or in this case a feeder frame, as you can see right here, once they do that, getting them to stop the robbing is very difficult. Prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say, and that is very true when it comes to honeybee apiary management. So here we are in October. That means, even though there are resources in the environment, asters are still a strong resource for the bees. They're getting a lot of pollen that we can see coming in, but if you look at this entrance, it has problems, and I have a quick fix that I've started using this year. That's right, HVAC aluminized tape. And it's good for indoors or outdoors. I've put this on a couple of hives already that I've found little gaps and openings in, and I've put it on and it's stayed. So I get out the Wolfbox here. What is that? Battery powered air little blower system for probably cleaning out computers and stuff, but you know what else it does? It blows bees right out of the way. It does not make them very happy, but I don't care because I'm blowing robbers out of the way. Once honeybees try to rob a colony, usually, if the colony can defend itself, they get those scouts and they attack them. In some cases, you can even find them dead in front of the landing board. I did not find a lot of bees that are dead, but I want you to see the behavior. Now, what did I just do? First of all, we had the bees going in through the top bars in those gaps that I could not close up. By the way, the follower board had too much of an opening in it. And the bees were already inside the hive, remember? And they have another entrance. So that means the bees inside this tiny colony. It only has 6 frames of comb. So they're underdogs to begin with. There's an example of a robber. When you see this abdomen twitching and grooming and stuff like that outside of a hive and then it flies away, that's a robber. So the good news is these bees are able to defend themselves. Even though it's a tiny colony, look what they're doing. They are grabbing onto every robber. Now, the initial response is a little more dramatic. And that's because, remember, we taped it up after I blew the bees off of where they were gaining access. So if you have multiple access points on your hives, I highly encourage you to go out and stare at them for extended periods of time, because you want to see if you're being robbed or if those bees are just residents. So here in the northeastern part of the United States, the northwestern part of the state of Pennsylvania, I highly recommend that you close up all entrances but one at this time of year, particularly with the tiny colonies like this one. They just can't take it. Now, the reason there are so many robbers being fought with here at the entrance now, remember we trapped them inside, they have no way out. So they are stuck inside, which means inside this hive, the worker bees are tracking them down and routing them out. Also, of course, right on cue, yellow jacket wasp tooling around. But what I want you to understand, this time of year, these wasps are the least of your worries. It's other colonies of bees that will rob you out. And the problem is, right, there are only so many guards in this colony. And if they're occupied at the entrance, that's fine. That's their job. That's where they should be. But if we're providing multiple entrances or oversized entrances, they need more guards. So more of the bee resources have to be used to defend the colony. So our job is to create small enough entrances that the bees can then defend easily. There are also some behaviors here that I want you to pay attention to because it is really interesting. And I like to say, are these residents or robbers? And how can you tell? So I already explained that when you see the abdomen twitching, see the ones being dragged off the landing board there, I think they want to kill the robbers. They just really don't have enough going on to do it. So here we are back at normal speed. And what do I see here? Another potential entry point. See the head of that bee right there? It's already inside. They're only getting through one at a time. Now this is the good news, if there is any. And that's at the other end of the same colony. That follower board faces the other side, which has a 17 frame colony of bees. They really shouldn't be trying to get into that one because they're going to get into a lot of trouble. Those bees can more than launch an adequate defense. There's a robber being dragged off. Now there are some other things I want you to see. See how they stick their faces in the face, or the proboscis in the proboscis of the bees that are robbing them. Let's wait until we get a really good example of that. This is in real time. It looks like it might be sped up, but it is not. Because what's happening is bees move really fast when there's something going on that is not good. You can tell who the robber is. You look at their abdomens too. Robbers often have little or no hair on their abdomens. And the whole while that this is going on, look at the pollen coming in. So we have regular foragers still trying to bring the resources back to the hive while the hive is in a state of defense. Look at the Nasonov there, which is something else the bees tend to do. Fan the Nasonov gland whenever there's a skirmish or competition because they are recruiting their own members of that hive. And so you'll see too that when they grab onto the other bees, they shove their faces in their face. And see how they're biting on all of its legs? They bite the wings, they bite the antennae, they go for the face. And they shove their mandibles in their faces, and one of the ways that they're determining who belongs and who does not is by how they smell. And so they're smelling their faces. And sometimes you'll see the defending bee, the one that wants to get away, the one that regrets showing up at this hive and trying to rob it. Sometimes they'll put out their own tongues and try to feed them. So they'll put out a little bit of the honey that they're stealing. In other words, here's half your stuff back kind of thing. And it doesn't work. But that's what I see going on. Probably in retrospect, I should have slowed way down and taken some really ultra slow motion sequences of these bees fighting so that we can see in greater detail. See them biting the wings there. They're trying to make this experience as unpleasant as possible, and of course remember they'd like to kill them. Honeybees just aren't good at killing other insects. Their mandibles are pretty smooth. They look like shoehorns if you ask me. And they can sting. In some cases you're going to see them doubling over. You'll see the abdomen of the defending colony's guard bee appear to be trying to deliver a sting into the body of the robber. But I've yet to see the stinger actually come out and insert itself. One of their favorite places to sting each other is actually not abdomen to abdomen, but they like to get their stingers up under their wings, on the thorax, because there's an opening there. There's a large spiracle up by the wing, and they can get, if they're good at aiming their stinger, they can get that into that opening and deliver some venom, and bees can die from the stings of other bees. Look here on top right. That one is really getting mobbed. And look at their proboscis again. They're shoving their faces. They're tasting and smelling and figuring out this bee does not belong. And sometimes you'll see this posture. They just stand there and seem to take it. They're biding their time. They're hoping to get away. And that one did. It just flew. So this goes on for an extended period of time. And if you don't feel like you want to watch it, you can jump ahead and see some other resolutions to robbing at the 17-minute and 47-second mark. Otherwise, we're going to keep talking about things here. Now, I want you to look at your own hives and watch to see. Robbers tend to go at the bottom of the hive, the side of the hive, the top of the hive, the back of the hive. The last place they want to go in is through the entrance. And that's because it's where the guard bees are. Now the other thing is, as I mentioned before, we want our bees to be able to focus their defenses on a single entrance this time of year. In a colony in a tree, they would have only one entrance, and they would be defending that as well. And I did recently see a bee tree. I was very excited about that. And we don't want to let the robbing start, because once it does, and the scouts go back to the parent colony and they come back with more scouts, the game is really increased. In other words, the risks are higher. You can lose a colony of bees to robbing. So it's not just that they're taking the resources, but this kind of conflict takes energy, and it also causes injury oftentimes. So when we go out in the early morning hours, we'll see dead bees, injured bees on the landing board. But remember too that sometimes on these cold nights that your bees are just expiring on their own and they're evicting themselves out onto the landing board. But we want to close things up, make things smaller for a lot of reasons. One is winter's coming. We don't want other things to get into our hive that challenge them. We don't want mice to get in. So we've done testing through the years. 3/8 of an inch high will keep a mouse and a shrew out. Even the tiny shrews. Unless you're in an area where you have the very tiny pygmy shrews. I've never seen one of those take over a beehive or move into a beehive, but that is basically what you're left with. That's the only thing that's going to get through a 3/8 of an inch entrance. There's a certain amount of satisfaction, I guess, in seeing these bees defend themselves, because one of the most defeated feelings you can have is when you look at a colony and they're not defending. The robbers are just coming and going, no defense. And then you'll see that there's detritus all over the landing board, little bits and pieces of beeswax everywhere. You also see little dirty footprint marks from the propolis and from the sticky feet they get because they're tearing into stored honey. And they get that all over themselves, and so they make a mess on the landing board. That is not the case here. They are still in the game. But when you find them defeated and just being overrun and the gates just seem to be unguarded, it's time to inspect that colony also, because we might want to figure out if they even still have a queen. Because I have noticed in the past that colonies that lack the ability to launch a defense often are not queen right. And in some cases, you can't even tell if there are any resident bees left, because not only will honeybees be coming and going through the entrances, you'll see wasps and maybe even a hornet or two, and you might see bumblebees going in. And when it's a free-for-all like that, you've basically, if that's happening in the month of October in the northeastern part of the U.S., you can write off that colony. So some other things I suppose you could do to interrupt the robbing. You could give them an oxalic acid vaporization treatment. That would shut them down for a little bit, assuming that, of course, you were like me and didn't catch it early and had a full-scale assault going on, like we're seeing here. If you can control that ahead of time, that's your best tactic. Oxalic acid vaporization is something that would drive them all out momentarily if they could go. And at the same time, you'd be killing some varroa destructor mites. And again, I want to point out, look at the pollen that's going in here. So the colony is trying to carry on business as usual, even though these little skirmishes are happening. And as I mentioned before, I wanted to show you a dead or dying bee. Oops, see the one that just went in? Very smooth abdomen, professional thief right there. And what do they have to lose? Their instincts are, of course, as eusocial insects, to put the survival of the colony that they come from first, above all else, including above their own safety and security. So these foragers are going out, once they discover a resource that their own colony needs, they don't back off. They just keep going. Now, if they were really being damaged, like this one right here is getting worked over pretty good. She is not a happy camper. They could go back to their parent colony, and then when they see one of their fellow foragers doing a waggle dance to advertise that there's a colony that's not well defended, you can go get their resources kind of thing, they can get beeped. That's right. The waggle dancer, if it's trying to encourage the bees in a colony to go back to an area where the bees are in jeopardy, they can get a stop order, which is a beep from another forager that's been to the same area. They ram them in the side, and they make a little sound, and they do it over and over until the waggle dance stops. That's how they indicate things have changed. The resources are not as available as they were. In fact, they're telling one another that you could be in jeopardy if you went there. And if you don't already know that the waggle dance is what bees perform, they go somewhere, they get a resource. What would be a better resource than already finished honey? Nothing. So already finished honey is a huge benefit to the bees, and they're willing to take these risks to get it because the benefit to the colony that they've come from is huge. So when they're bringing that back, other bees taste what they brought back, so they stick out their tongue. There's trophallaxis. That's when they pass on what they're carrying with them to other bees in the colony. And then if it's approved, they all start paying attention to that forager's waggle dance. And when that bee waggle dances, it communicates the direction, the distance of the resource that it collected. So honeybees can get that information from a hive and fly out even without the forager that came back to the hive, and they can find the resource. So they find it a lot of ways. One, the waggle dance instructions, of course, but remember they also tasted what that forager brought back. They smelled it, they tasted it, they know what it's like. So when they get in the vicinity of the area where that forager came from, they are looking for that same smell, and then they'll validate that by tasting whatever it was. And then more and more of the bees fly out. Now here at this time of the year, today is October the 6th. We have a lot of foragers that can go out because the population of these colonies is extremely high, which means we have thousands of foragers that can be sent out at a moment's notice to prepare for the coming winter. And once they start foraging, the bees we're looking at here are only good for a couple of weeks anyway. I don't see a lot of tattered wings, although that's a pretty good indicator of a bee that's been working really hard. And of course, what pays more? Going out on a few asters, taking all afternoon to fill your honey crop, or zipping in and getting already finished honey from a low defense hive or hive that's got a back door open. That's their favorite. Open back doors. Open upper entrances. Entrances that are too wide that the bees that are resident to the colony can't defend. Now I went to the other end of this top bar hive and look what happened. My top bar is warped. That's an unpleasant surprise. And look, there's a little opening here, so that makes two openings on the other end here. And remember, this is a fully populated colony. This colony is not a pushover at all. So in other words, if they want to get into it, they're going to have to do it through openings like that. But I have a secret weapon. What is it? Aluminized tape. HVAC tape. And now they have an extreme weather adhesion for that tape. And I've put that on another hive, and guess what? It looks like the very day that I put it on. So when you find things that need to be repaired, go to your local plumbing supply, your hardware store, and get HVAC aluminized tape, and you can temporarily patch holes in a pinch. So I recommend that you tool around outside, look at all your hives, and see what's going on. Now this is the more conventional repair on a hive that has an easy to defend entrance, right? So this is a standard Langstroth hive. This is the newest version of the robbing screen. That's made by Bee Smart Designs, sold at Better Bee. This is not a sponsored video. What I want to show you is we've allowed the ventilation to go on, and it opens up in the middle and the bees come and go. Do I have to put it on every hive? No. This is beehive number 44. They are going strong. They are unusual. Look at they built their own entrance reducer. It's made out of propolis. Look at the activity here. This is a 5 deep frame over 5 deep frame. Hear that buzzing there? That's someone that tried to rob them. Huge mistake, because these are feisty little bees. In fact, if I sit here too long and stare at these bees, they'll come and sting me. For no reason, we always say. It's for no reason. But really, I'm a large animal. I'm sitting next to the entrance of a hive. They are going gangbusters, and as I mentioned, they reduce their own entrance. The other thing is when you put an entrance reducer modification, or if you put a robbing screen on, and these are designed, I'm told, to be left on year round. So I'm starting to actually warm up to that being a possibility. That's a 10 frame Langstroth hive with a solid bottom board. And it has a 3/8 of an inch reversible bottom board, so 3/8 of an inch is up. And again, we don't have to put one on this one because of all the propolis. They made these tiny entrances, so even a tiny colony can defend a tiny opening. That's what I want you to know. And these are doing great. I just like looking at them. Now they are in the shade. I wish I had put them maybe in a sunnier spot. But there is some dappled sunlight coming through, and that's because the leaves are falling off the trees. And so I think that will benefit them also. We're going to have a lot of fun watching to see how these go through winter. They are spending like very low amounts of energy trying to defend their colony, and therefore they can focus their activities on foraging and getting resources in at the end of the year. But the pollen influx here just lets me know that they're thriving. And it's a heavy colony. I did feed it, so I have to mention that as well. But they are, considering that this is from a queen that was abandoned from a swarm, she was just out there by herself, and as an afterthought I collected her. They're doing great. Now here's another hive where the entrance is too large. You can see that I did have a screen on there to reduce the entrance, but I pulled that because I wanted to test something. So remember, the entrance was off center, so I pulled the tabs off of one side of one of these robbing screens so I could shift it over. And what time of day did I do it? Middle of the day. So what I wanted to do was see how confused the bees would be if I changed their entrance in the middle of the day, and I did leave the robbing screen entrance up at the top open on one side. None of them used it. And that's because now with this new design they have an opening dead center, which means when your bees come back from foraging, they've got all the pollen on their corbicula, they can zip right in through that entrance. I don't see a lot of confused bees. Now I used regular screws. I didn't use the push pins that come with it, which you see here on the top. I put screws in because I'm going to leave this on all winter. But the best part of my experiment was that even with all the foragers out in the morning and me changing their entrance midday, they had no problem at all finding their way right back into this hive. Now it wasn't being robbed, so that's the good news. But remember, you don't want any robbing to even start. So the key is to make sure we have entrances small enough. If we have the apame hives, which we do, their entrances are already set up. In other words, you can just slide them tighter and reduce the entrance opening. And so therefore we increase their ability to defend themselves from potential robbing bees. So we see the apames in the background. Not every hive is going to need an entrance, especially those like Hive 44 that built their own reduction. But we have options now. Tabs at the top. If they were getting robbed, we redirect our bees up through one of those tabs and we close that center entrance. And then the robbers get fooled because they smell the hive through all those vented holes and they try to go straight in, but they can't, and the resident bees go out through the top right or top left, whatever you decide to do. And also that's a mouse guard. So we have that. There's lots of options. So what I want to explain today, October the 6th, Monday, on a 78-degree Fahrenheit day, that it's time to check your hives and make sure that they can defend themselves. Thank goodness my top bar hive is back under control. Business as usual. Thank you to my excellent aluminized taping job that I'm going to leave there all winter, by the way. And hope that you're catching up with your bees. Thanks for watching. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this has been The Way to Be.